The Global Shelter Cluster is a coordination mechanism that supports people affected by disasters and conflict with the means to live in safe, dignified, and appropriate shelter. The Global Shelter Cluster enables better coordination among all shelter actors so that people who need shelter assistance get help faster and receive the right kind of support. Shelter Projects is a flagship publication of the Global Shelter Cluster. It embodies the principles of partnership and collective accountability that the cluster approach is founded upon. The launch of this 9th edition symbolizes our collective commitment to improve our humanitarian shelter and settlement response, but it also reflects the strength and resilience of the affected communities, who are the primary responders and the main actors in their own recovery process. Shelter Projects is critical for the Global Shelter Cluster as a vehicle to document and share practice, learn from past experiences, and shape future shelter response programs and strategies. It is a tool that fosters collaboration and knowledge sharing, empowering us to create lasting change. With needs increasing at a faster rate than resources, it is critical that we become more efficient in our response, building on the learning that Shelter Projects offers us. This edition takes us on a journey across the globe, highlighting the challenges faced by communities in the aftermath of hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, conflicts, and other crises. But more importantly, it showcases the innovative approaches and diverse support methods that have been implemented to address shelter needs in a wide array of settlement situations. From the urban centers in Venezuela to the rural communities in Indonesia, the Shelter Projects publication paints a vivid picture of the transformative impact we can achieve when we work together. I sincerely hope you will find this edition of Shelter Projects interesting and useful in your work to support communities affected by crisis in their own response efforts. I look forward to the continued success and impact of the Shelter Projects initiative and to the opportunity it provides us to advance a better, greener, and more integrated shelter and settlement response that better connects with longer-term recovery and durable solutions. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today for this launch of the Shelter Project's 9th edition. My name is Nancy Duran, and I am the USAID Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance Shelter and Settlements team lead. I am thrilled to be able to celebrate the hard work of the Shelter Projects working group as they launch the 9th edition today. One of the strategic objectives of my team is to strengthen evidence-based humanitarian shelter and settlements best practices. Investing in Shelter Projects is part of that. Shelter Projects is the only community of practice compilation of evidence-based, peer-reviewed case studies of shelter and settlements programs, and is an excellent source for information and learning opportunities. As we take this time to celebrate the accomplishments of the 9th edition, we also want to take the opportunity to ask ourselves, what does the next iteration of Shelter Projects look like? Here at USAID, we are committed to supporting localization in pursuit of locally led actions. This means that more and more shelter and settlements programming will be implemented by local partners. The next iteration of Shelter Projects could support this transition to more localized approaches by highlighting the work of local actors in humanitarian responses and identifying case study frameworks that can inform operationalizing community-led humanitarian responses. Additionally, as it has done in the past, Shelter Projects should continue to identify ways to increase accessibility to the practitioners of tomorrow, accounting for technological and language differences, and engaging local actors in identifying appropriate forms for this information exchange. Again, congratulations for the excellent work of the Shelter Projects Working Group. We look forward to continuing to support this powerful evidence-based learning tool.
In 2022, 185 million people were affected by disasters, and over 100 million people were forcibly displaced. Conflict, instability, disasters, and climate change have created unparalleled needs. And as crises become more complex and more protracted, our responses to shelter and settlement needs must continually evolve, improve, and make the best use of the often limited resources. Shelter Projects is a compilation of case studies intended to support learning in the sector by encouraging practitioners to reflect on the strengths, the weaknesses, and the lessons that can be learned from their work. Shelter Projects brings together a wide variety of shelter and settlements interventions from all over the world. It is designed to capture the scale and breadth of the sector's work, and each case study and crisis response overview provides the reader with an analysis of the challenges faced, the solutions implemented, and what the practitioners identify as strengths, weaknesses, wider project impacts, and the essential lessons for the future. The primary audience is shelter and settlements practitioners from local, national, and international organizations, including those who are new to the sectors or are seasoned professionals. But we want the publication to also appeal to local and national government counterparts who are involved in crisis response, and also to students and those who will become future practitioners. The knowledge captured by Shelter Projects has already been used to inform program design, has been useful resource for advocacy, and calling for the application of best practices, as well as for training and supporting academic research. We intend to continue to expand its readership, its supporters, and contributors.
This publication, written by practitioners for practitioners, is a result of a very collaborative process. Authors, peer reviewers, and editors work together to ensure that each piece captures relevant knowledge and adds value to the learning in our sector. For that reason, we would like to thank all the contributors, peer reviewers, and also the donors that make the project possible. We also encourage the readers to contribute to further case studies so that we can continue to capture and to learn from the diverse nature of our work. We invite you all to explore the 28 case studies and the research abstracts in this latest new edition, and also the hundreds of case studies which are already available in Shelter Project's website. If you would like to be involved in future editions, please contact us. Thank you and enjoy.
Hello there, my name is Charles Parak from the Centre for Development and Emergency Practice at Oxford Brookes University, and I'd like to make a presentation on the case study analysis for Shelter Project's 9th edition, and we analysed the strengths and weaknesses of some of the recurring themes. We asked the case study contributors to present as part of their case study strengths and weaknesses of their project, what they thought were the strengths and weaknesses. So it's self-reported, so it's not an exact science, and there are some inherent biases, but we take that into consideration. And it's a free text box, and they report 3 to 5, sometimes more, sometimes less, strengths and weaknesses from their project. And we, in collaboration with the Shelter Projects Working Group, analyze those into recurring themes. And it's a really great exercise. We've been doing it for 3 of the last editions now. So we're building up an analysis across editions as well as within the edition. And what you can see is when we look at the table, here are the strengths and weaknesses. You can see the themes across the top and strengths and weaknesses for each project. And when we look at that in a table itself, you can see that what we've done is you can see the most commonly reported themes, and you can see them in this table at output level and at outcome level. So strengths are reported both at output and outcome level, and we've captured that in this diagram. So you can see that the top ones: project planning, community engagement, local authority engagement, coordination, partnerships, coverage, and durability. Just a couple of words about some of those. Project planning is much more likely to be reported as a weakness. Time and timing is really commonly reported as a weakness. Project timeline was too short, or parts of the project took longer than anticipated, or time planning was a weakness, not seasonality wasn't taken into consideration, for example. Where it was recorded as a strength, for example, the project structure was a strength, or clarity of roles. Community engagement, much more likely to be reported as a strength than a weakness, and some strength benefits to the project were putting people at the center, engagement of vulnerable groups, community involvement with messaging or consultation, and sustained participation. That there were some really empowering examples of as well, where transparency and accountability were encouraged, and even co-creation and co-design. The coordination and partnerships also much more likely to be reported as a strength, and productive partnerships, for example, between contractors, engineers, consulting with local NGOs, organizations at national, local, and international level, very much integrating together. And also the diaspora was mentioned as well. Coverage and scale, much more likely to be reported as a weakness, about the scale of the need and the scale of the project compared to that need, and how sometimes this contributed to raise tension, or unclear how the market could be scaled up, or in one example, market forces provided a barrier. Local authority and local government engagement, evenly balanced between strengths and weaknesses. Where it's a strength, promoting understanding and helping roles and responsibilities, better respond to security crises. And there's a weakness, lack of participation in urban interventions or constraining shelter modalities, for example, or decision-making time by authorities. Durability, much more likely to be reported as a strength. And safer, stronger, more private, more resilient, appropriate construction methods, engagement of community leaders, appropriate technology, and quality of materials. And finally, some interesting points on other themes. Diaspora engagement was mentioned, and it's something that we, I think, should consider as a theme for analysis in the future. And then the rental market also it came across a number of themes. So it intersected with protection, private sector engagement, transitional shelter, social cohesion. So that's something that could be looked into more. Thank you, and over from me.
Hi all, this is Samuel from IAM Ethiopia Madagascar sub-office. I'm going to present you an overall approach by projects that have been conducted in Madagascar city, which is a capital city of Tigray, northern Ethiopia. And the context of the project, in November 2020, the conflict have been erupted among the Tigray regional forces and the Ethiopian federal government forces. As a result of this heavy conflict, many IDPs have been influxed into two major urban areas, mainly to Mabala and Syria. As a result of this, many schools and collective centers have been accommodating IDPs, mostly from Western Tigray and other inaccessible areas. And as a result of this, integration of IDPs into the host family is one of the alternative solutions for sustainable shelter provision. As a result of this project, different tools have been implemented to address this piloting project, and different tools have been used for the success of the project. And the project, we call it a neighborhood approach, or it is an area-based approach mainly. Its objective is to provide an alternative shelter option for IDPs, which are hosted by host family, or IDPs which are living in collective center will be relocated into host community. And the main purpose of this is to open schools, and the government want to resume the educational process system. And the modality for this project is an in-kind, which is a customized in-kind material plus a cash disbursement. And different implementation tools have been conducted. Mainly the intention survey and conception of three typologies is the most important one to be stated here. According to the door-to-door assessment, the shelterings come up with three alternative options for this project. The first one is providing of new expansion, which is providing of a livable space for the IDPs which are living in host community. In this case, we have used the building code 60/40 built up area to open space ratio. So we'll add new space in the plot area. The second one is renovation. It's about major maintenance of component like fixing of door, window, roofing, etc. It is major maintenance of the parts. And the third one is rehabilitation, which is a minor maintenance of part of the house. And in this one, it includes plastering, painting, plumbing works. So these three scenarios have been developed according to the door-to-door assessment and intention survey that have been conducted. And these are some of the fruits of the project: new expansion project, renovation, rehabilitation projects have been constructed as a result of this project. And this project is new in its kind, and we have been conducting this project during the blockage and siege time. So it has so many challenges, but we come up with some smart solutions as a result of this. One of the challenges to each household needs a customized solution, but at least for the scalability and project efficiency, we divided the scenario into three, as I have mentioned it. And this is one of the challenges, and different lessons have been learned because of new its kind project. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone and welcome. In our today presentation, we are going to highlight a case study focusing on a project that was done in Karobei settlement on inclusive shelter. The project specifically targeted households with vulnerable individuals such as persons with disability, GBV survivors, as well as elderly and children, and mainly aim at providing a shelter code designed and adapted or tailored to their specific needs. In this presentation, I'm also going to highlight the approaches we used, various key project highlights, challenges, and lessons learned. It was critically noted after various assessment and consultation with the partner and community members, there was at least focus in this key area, and there was a high need for intervention in terms of shelter response. The project was basically designed to assist in the recovery and to enhance the integration and self-reliance of persons with disabilities and those with special needs, promoting skill development, knowledge exchange, and dissemination, as well as enhancing capacity building. To achieve this, and as part of the project main output indicated, the organization adopted a community-led approach in planning, design, beneficiary selection, and activity implementation that enabled us to co-design a simple or inclusive, durable, and easy to construct shelter model that can be rolled out and replicated in other parts of the settlement. Since the collapse of peace agreement and the renewed crisis in South Sudan in the year 2014, Karobei Integrated Settlement was established, and its capacity had raised to approximately 45,000 persons by the time of this study in the year 2022. And the number of people with special needs living in the settlement was 3,435. The settlement promotes self-reliance, inclusion, and integration of refugee and host community at a key step. Some of the main highlights of this project include intensive use of local material, available skilled construction worker who was selected in coordination with the relevant stakeholder within the settlement that included the village and neighborhood leaders, as well as the organized community-based organization. Their skills were advanced through skill training on how to construct the design shelter. To enhance gender inclusivity as well, female members were considered and trained to become skilled laborers. The shelter designed focused mainly on need for privacy in order to improve the dignity and well-being of the users, and as such, a durable and flexible shelter with adequate partitions aimed to provide adequacy, safety, and security. On site selection and suitability, Karobei Settlement Advisory Plan, a master plan governing land use and allocation in the settlement, was used to guide the process. Other factors, though, were considered in site plot selection, were, among others, proximity to close relative, caregivers, essential basic facility, plot adequacy and availability, as well as the flood risks. Participant identification and selection was done through a collaborative approach with the partners working in shelter and protection program. Assessment and verification was also implemented together with the community leaders who help in identification and tracking. Cross-coordination was enhanced among partners, beneficiary, and local leadership in order to reduce any chance of tension during project implementation and handover. Main lessons learned: it was important to ensure coordination with other agencies already working for people with special needs, and this was strengthened. Many people with disability are quite open and willing to participate in planning and designing of their shelter, and the organization intended to engage more of these participants and stakeholders in the future. Promoting the use of local available materials and labor reduced implementation costs and promoted socioeconomic cohesion for the host community, and in the long end, helped to achieve strategic objectives at the key steps. Some of the strengths encountered include fostered inclusive shelter planning and design. Secondly, there was enhanced social integration and cohesion between the host and refugee community. On the weakness and challenges, the shelter constructed were randomly located across the community and were difficult to monitor. And there was also the issue of limited scale of the project due to the constrained donor funding. Finally, there was no or lacked adequate training on repair or maintenance of the shelter and the COVID-19 challenges. That's all, and many thanks for watching. Many thanks also goes out to Global Shelter Cluster team for all the support and guidance.
Salame Tungasu.
Bienvenue, welcome. This overview refers to the sectoral response to the Category 4 tropical cyclones Batsirai and Emnati that impacted Madagascar in February 2022. It focused especially around the conditional cash for shelter programming approach that was implemented at scale in peri-urban and rural areas. The coordinated interagency response supported shelter self-recovery through owner-driven repair and reconstruction, while disseminating safe shelter awareness and building back safer principle at community level. Moreover, the tools developed and the experience gained on cash for shelter programming enhanced the response to tropical cyclone Freddy that landed in the same region 1 year after.
The two cyclones severely impacted communities with more than 423,000 people. 3,400 homes were damaged or destroyed, and 3,500 households with shelter needs. As part of this response, more than 17,500 households have been supported through cash for shelter assistance to repair, retrofit, or rebuild. More than 14,700 households have been supported with technical support, safe shelter, and building back safer assistance.
The conditional cash for shelter approach used to rebuild or repair traditional housing, considering building back safer principle, improved the knowledge of the community and local workers on safer construction techniques. Because some households started to repair home before activity started, the new inputs assisted them in retrofitting efforts. The conditional cash for shelter approach was culturally adapted to affected communities, as most settlements were homogenic in the typologies of homes built. None of the building back safer disseminated messages contradicted local traditional knowledge, but instead were aimed to reactivate, replicate, and improve local construction practices and indigenous knowledge. This is a quote from Tsotso, a carpenter involved in a building back safer shelter program, interviewed after the impact of TC Freddy in February 2023 that impacted the same area. We learned many things, including how to choose wisely in terms of where to rebuild our houses and how to make them resistant to strong winds while also using local material. The shelter we built together confidently withstood the strong winds we heard last night, said Tsotso. Now the community can see that our techniques are working. I am willing to encourage them and support them with the actual rebuilding of their homes.
Conditional cash for shelter programming on the top of emergency shelter assistance was an appropriate approach to support the self-recovery of affected populations while enhancing building back safer message dissemination. The amount of cash distributed should be reassessed each time to reflect the actual budget needed to repair or rebuild homes without hampering the implementation of building back safer measures. Further advocacy to authorities would be necessary to increase the amount with an additional 25% as the baseline for future responses to allow reconstruction at scale. Cash for shelter programming might have an adverse impact on the environment as the timber used to repair or rebuild homes was often purchased in areas close to the project's location from landowners who were not registered as official suppliers. Additional supply chain support for timber should be explored for the next response as for the new conditionalities to mitigate impact on the environment. Considering protection, gender, and inclusion within the project implementation could widen the impact of this approach. As for promotion of women in leading role with beneficiaries groups, or for setting up plain safe space for children next to the model house construction site. Misaotra niaraka taminay. Merci.
Thank you for listening.
I would like to introduce our case study from Nigeria. I would like to start by giving a little background to the context where the project was implemented. It's now 14 years since the Boko Haram uprising began in northeast Nigeria. The region has experienced brutal attacks on civilians and massive destruction of infrastructure as a result of the armed conflict. The project locations are Bama and Goza in Borno State of northeast Nigeria. The project summary: 650 permanent shelters installed with micro-home solar systems were constructed to the most vulnerable households, with completely damaged shelters in Bama and Goza local government areas in northeast Nigeria. The local communities were directly engaged and trained on shelter construction skills to design and build back their shelters. And a cash-based approach to shelter construction was employed in the project. The pictures below are damaged shelters in Bama and Goza as a result of the armed conflict. The main project outputs 650 permanent shelters installed with micro-home solar systems were constructed to the most vulnerable households in these two locations. A total of 5,533 individuals were directly reached by the project, and indirect beneficiaries of the project on local skilled and unskilled laborers were engaged, trained, and engaged to build back their communities. The main project highlights the participatory approach to community engagement of the project is one of the key highlights, where the communities were engaged to design their shelters, to map damaged houses in their communities, to select the most vulnerable households in their communities. So additionally, local labor engagement and livelihood support by engaging the communities, local skilled and unskilled laborers from the communities were engaged to build back their shelters. And one of the key highlights also is the clean energy, where all the 650 permanent shelters were installed with micro-home solar systems. The main project lessons learned: the active community engagement throughout the project cycle has helped to increase a sense of shelter ownership and it has contributed to the recovery of the affected population. A market-based approach to shelter construction using local materials, local vendors, local laborers instead of the traditional contractor. This has reduced the cost of construction of these permanent shelters. So initially the project targeted 300 households, but due to this community-led approach, it has we get savings from the project, and we increase the caseload and reach 650 households at the end. The cost of permanent shelter was not affordable to low-income individuals from the project communities. So as recommendations moving forward, we have come up with, in a separate project, we have come up with a low-cost permanent shelters using stabilized mud bricks, which we'll be happy to share in the next edition of the shelter project. Thank you.
Shelter improvements for persons with disability in northeast Nigeria. Following massive destruction of infrastructure and widespread displacement due to brutal attacks on civilians by armed groups as a result of the Boko Haram crisis, which started in 2009, this project is a response to the needs for improved shelter for persons with disability living in camps or camp-like settings. In displacement settings, persons with disabilities often encounter severe challenges accessing fundamental necessities such as shelter, food, education, and livelihoods. Due to the hasty nature of emergency camp setups, the needs of persons with disabilities are often neglected, leaving them with unaccommodating environments. Utilizing a participatory approach, persons with disabilities were empowered to choose these improvements, ensuring the improvements aligned precisely with their unique requirements. Beyond shelter enhancements, the project aims to improve other aspects of living conditions, including health, water, sanitation, hygiene, livelihoods, and protection through referral pathways. The project also sought to foster inclusion of persons with disabilities within camps. A total of 221 persons with disabilities and their families, consisting of 965 individuals in all, benefited from the project deliverables. The output included the provision of shelter improvements tailored to the unique needs of persons with disabilities. 22 staff members were trained on improvements of shelter for persons with disabilities, while 23 were trained on health referrals, community engagement, MHPSS, and child protection for persons with disabilities. Community engagement activities included drama, music, and dance to communicate the key messages of the project to the camp population. The project timeline, which commenced in November 2020 with planning, assessment, design, and procurement, implemented around September, October 2021, while the second phase was implemented between April and May 2022. Assessment activities included focus group discussions with persons with disabilities within each camp, and it also involved shelter visits and administering of questionnaires to persons with disabilities and their caregivers. The 20 most common needs for improvements were compiled and designs were developed for each during the phase 1. A comprehensive catalogue of these shelter improvements was developed to serve the needs of the project and guide future implementation. The toilet seat, the raised cooking area, and the wooden handrail are amongst many of the shelter improvement options that were designed. IEC tools of the project included T-shirts, banners, leaflets, which were all used to sensitize the camp community on the proposed improvements. Main challenges of the project included delay in response to referrals from other sectors such as WASH and health, as well as the understanding of the concept of the project by the contractor, which took some time for the contractor to get a full grasp of what we intended to do. Lessons learned included the need for multisectoral proposals to address barriers faced by persons with disability within camps, a child-friendly questionnaire would have been useful to address child caregivers during the data collection stage. The cultural event helped significantly in breaking barriers and sensitizing camp population on the intended project, as well as prefabrication and assembling of all the standard improvements significantly reduced delivery time. Thank you.
"79 R4V shelter partners delivered assistance to more than 620,000 people in 16 countries. To make this possible in a harmonized, efficient, and coordinated manner, the shelter sector established 4 lines of intervention in the Regional Response Plan. The first is access to temporary collective shelter, an emergency response that provides short-term shelter solutions for people in transit or those who have recently arrived at a destination. The second is access to individual shelter solutions, which focuses mainly on achieving durable solutions for refugees and migrants in destination, frequently through rental assistance programs, but also supports those in transit by providing hotel rooms. This is always based on the framework of the right to access adequate housing. The third is settlement interventions, which benefits refugees and migrants as well as host communities through infrastructure development and improvement. This approach has helped promote social cohesion, peaceful coexistence, safety, and socioeconomic integration. And the fourth line of intervention is distribution of essential household items, which mainly focuses on the distribution of safe transit kits for refugees and migrants moving along the route, and of kitchen sets, furniture, and other non-food items for those in destination benefiting from shelter programs and settling in their new homes. Capacity building through context-specific technical guidance and tool development is key for the implementation of this response plan. Throughout these years of intense work, the shelter sector has faced several challenges, such as positioning a new and unique regional coordination mechanism, working mainly remotely in a region with different geographical, historical, and cultural backgrounds, which has required adapted responses, addressing the needs of refugees and migrants in different stages of the process of achieving durable solutions, facilitating long-term sustainable solutions in a complex and challenging political and economic context, compounded by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and lack of funding for coordination and operations. Against this complex backdrop, the shelter sector has made significant achievements in the past 5 years. It has adapted the response to urban contexts, transitioning from emergency shelter to adequate housing. Cross-cutting synergies have been made between the shelter and integration sectors, HLP, CWC, and AAP to promote social cohesion and safety in marginalized areas hosting vulnerable and crisis-affected populations. Interagency coordination mechanisms have been adapted in the field based on the resources available, which has resulted in a more comprehensive and efficient response. And mirrored structures at the regional, national, and local levels have helped to raise awareness about the needs in the field, while allowing an adequate response following humanitarian standards.
La crisis económica y política en Venezuela ha causado una gran movilidad humana en América Latina, superando la capacidad de gobiernos y comunidades locales. Hasta agosto de 2023, 7.7 millones de venezolanos han dejado su país, de los cuales 6.5 millones se han dirigido a países latinoamericanos. Para abordar esta situación, se ha implementado el proyecto Ciudades Incluyentes, Comunidades Solidarias, con el objetivo de reducir las vulnerabilidades de los refugiados y migrantes venezolanos y fortalecer la resiliencia de las comunidades de acogida en 6 países y 10 ciudades de América Latina y el Caribe. Este proyecto promueve la integración de refugiados, migrantes y comunidades de acogida a través de la construcción social del hábitat, centrándose en 3 áreas principales: protección y orientación para todos, integración socioeconómica y buena gobernanza migratoria, y desarrollo territorial inclusivo y sostenible. En el ámbito urbano se han implementado acciones de urbanismo táctico para mejorar los entornos urbanos y fomentar la integración entre comunidades en movimiento y de acogida. Estas intervenciones son colaborativas, de bajo costo, rápidas de implementar, centrándose en la creación de nuevos usos y maximización del valor compartido de los espacios públicos. En Bucaramanga y otras ciudades, estas acciones han tenido un impacto positivo, transformando espacios físicos y beneficiando alrededor de 30 beneficiarios directos y 50 indirectos por acción, sumando aproximadamente 800 beneficiarios en la región. En Bucaramanga, el urbanismo táctico ha demostrado su eficacia al transformar espacios mediante intervenciones menores, como el aula abierta en el barrio Granjas de Provenza. Esta iniciativa ha convertido un espacio residual cerca de una canaleta en un aula al aire libre para niños y adolescentes sin acceso a educación formal. Al menos 20 niños de la comunidad refugiada, migrante y de acogida reciben clases en este lugar, beneficiando a toda la población del barrio al mejorar el espacio público y reducir la contaminación ambiental y la presencia de pandillas criminales. La participación activa de la comunidad ha sido fundamental en la formulación e implementación de estas acciones, con vecinos, niños, adolescentes y padres involucrados en la planificación y apoyo de las intervenciones. Además, se destaca la importancia de involucrar a líderes comunitarios y establecer una buena relación con la comunidad local para garantizar el éxito de estos proyectos. En resumen, el proyecto Ciudades Incluyentes, Comunidades Solidarias está marcando un hito en la integración y la lucha contra la xenofobia, como se refleja en la exitosa implementación del aula abierta en Bucaramanga. Este logro es motivo de orgullo y destaca la importancia de seguir promoviendo la integración y colaboración en la región.
The Integrados project is a proposal that seeks to respond to the needs of the Venezuelan population in Ecuador. Migrant families prioritize access to food, housing, and employment has need to be met. Hence, Integrados develops the emergency and development nexus mainly because it focuses on the priorities reported by the families. On strengthening of community protection networks, the Integrados project intervenes the housing sector to facilitate access to safe housing for the migrant population in their host communities, strengthen productive initiatives in their homes, and improve community spaces to strengthen the socioeconomic integration of migrants. Integrados is a project that integrates three complementary sectors, which has made it possible to develop the nexus between humanitarian aid and development, in that, while the project responds to the immediate needs of Venezuelan living in an emergency situation, it also offers viable, durable solutions for long-term integration and autonomy. Integrados focus on community protection as a gateway to shelter and subsequently to livelihood activities, differentiates it from other approaches by accompanying families to transition from temporary to long-term shelter and protecting their livelihoods. Hence, its relevance is centered on the potential to facilitate integration processes of the migrant population in host communities in a fast and safe manner. Both the needs assessment of the families and the technical analysis of the housing infrastructure allow the adaptation of the housing to meet the specific protection needs of the families, increasing the perception on safety and well-being of the migrant families.
El proyecto se ejecuta en un país que se encuentra en una ruta migratoria, este país es Ecuador, y se ejecuta en las provincias de Guayas y El Oro, en respuesta a la crisis migratoria venezolana, la cual inició también en un contexto de pandemia por COVID-19, el cual exacerbó la situación de la población migrante, refugiada, solicitante de asilo. El proyecto busca intervenir espacios comunitarios, unidades habitacionales donde viven tanto la población venezolana como la población ecuatoriana para realizar mejoras en la infraestructura y en los espacios comunitarios mejorar las posibilidades de compartir y también de diversificar el espacio para ser utilizado tanto para niños, niñas, adolescentes como para mujeres emprendedoras y darle un uso más efectivo los espacios. Y se busca además también la integración entre las comunidades que habitan en estos espacios.
Creemos que las soluciones tienen que venir de la comunidad. Para esto, algo que se debe mencionar es el desarrollo de talleres de diseño participativo, donde las soluciones a las problemáticas del contexto venían justamente de la práctica de la comunidad con el espacio. A su vez, parte del desarrollo de los 3 outputs del proyecto lograron que la población, tanto de la comunidad, familias inmigrantes, la población ecuatoriana, familias ecuatorianas, se integren mejor hacia los espacios, volcándose hacia los espacios públicos. Para la mejora de los espacios propusimos talleres de diseño participativo donde las soluciones venían desde la comunidad. Creemos además que estas soluciones deben ser drásticas, que cambien el espacio de manera permanente y que se mantengan en el tiempo, porque de esta forma las relaciones entre la comunidad y el espacio se afianzan con el tiempo.
Un ejemplo vivo de la infraestructura que pervive en el tiempo, que es sostenible, es este espacio en el barrio de Mapasingue, en la ciudad de Guayaquil. Esta casa comunitaria, que le han puesto el nombre Faro de Mapasingue, ha resistido diferentes movimientos telúricos, ha resistido lluvias fuertes que caracterizan esta zona y también ha permitido que la comunidad pueda utilizar el espacio desde su inauguración en el año 2021 y hoy estamos ya en el año 2023 y el espacio sigue en funcionamiento. ¿Quién mejor que la lideresa comunitaria, en este caso quien ha manejado y administrado el espacio, nos pueda compartir un poco? Adelante.
Bueno, soy Bélica Mosquera, lideresa comunitaria de 29 años atrás. Me siento orgullosa y contenta de mantener este espacio en buen estado después de haberla recuperado muchos años en abandono, destruida y que nadie la utilizaba. Y ahora la hemos recuperado y tenemos muchas actividades dentro del espacio y la comunidad se ha...
A finales de octubre e inicios de noviembre del año 2020, Honduras fue afectada por 2 fenómenos naturales, los huracanes ETA e IOTA, afectando principalmente los departamentos de Cortés, Lloro, Santa Bárbara y Atlántida. Después de ambos eventos en diciembre, los reportes indicaban más de 4 millones de personas afectadas, haciendo un total de más de 900,000 familias, 99 personas fallecidas, 11 desaparecidos y muchos daños y pérdidas a nivel de infraestructura, agricultura y medios de vida. Se estima que un 5% de las 1.8 millones de viviendas ocupadas en el país fueron afectadas. Más de 80,000 viviendas fueron afectadas. Luego del impacto de los huracanes, un aproximado de 88,000 personas requería de un alojamiento temporal y 35,000 personas requería de una reparación de su vivienda. El proyecto fue implementado en Honduras por una organización no gubernamental nacional con apoyo de su red internacional, junto a otra ONG internacional especializada en alojamientos de emergencia. Una organización de la sociedad civil local también fue de apoyo, junto a gobiernos locales, municipales y otras organizaciones presentes en el país. Con el proyecto se atendió en la primera fase a 3.208 familias que recibieron kits de alojamiento de emergencia con su respectivo entrenamiento y capacitación para el uso adecuado de los componentes y lograr una reconstrucción segura. La segunda fase consistió en lograr 2 proyectos de reasentamiento para un total de 26 familias que pasaron de su alojamiento temporal a una vivienda permanente. Los alojamientos temporales fueron principalmente de 18 metros cuadrados o 12 metros cuadrados, dependiendo de los recursos disponibles y del número de personas por familia. Los kits de alojamiento de emergencia distribuidos incluían lonas, herramientas básicas, artículos no alimentarios como ser lámparas solares, mosquiteros, filtros de agua, sets de cocinas, frazadas, entre otros. En las zonas más afectadas también se apoyó a las familias con madera y láminas. Los proyectos de reasentamientos o reubicación fueron posibles gracias a la provisión de lotes de terrenos por parte de 2 gobiernos locales a 26 familias. Estos alojamientos temporales de las familias fueron levantados sobre fundaciones o cimentación de concreto que sirvió de base para una futura vivienda permanente. Contaban con paredes de estructura de madera forrada con lonas y techo de aluzinc. Estos alojamientos temporales fueron utilizados por aproximadamente un año, tiempo necesario para preparar, organizar y lograr los fondos requeridos para las viviendas permanentes. En ese momento, las familias se movieron a la parte posterior de su lote y participaron activamente en la construcción final de su vivienda permanente con un área aproximada de 36 metros cuadrados. Se destaca entre las lecciones aprendidas que el éxito del proyecto estuvo basado en el involucramiento de la comunidad y sus líderes locales, la coordinación a través del clúster de alojamiento de emergencia o directamente con las autoridades nacionales y locales fue clave para evitar la duplicidad de apoyo a las familias. Tanto las autoridades locales como los líderes comunitarios fueron involucrados desde las primeras visitas a las comunidades afectadas para la selección de las familias, el entrenamiento y capacitación, la posterior distribución de los kits y el seguimiento para el uso adecuado de los kits. Gracias por su atención.
Over 9 million Rohingya refugees live in Cox's Bazar since 2017 in a highly dense and congested camp areas on hills, which is prone to landslide and flood risks. The shelters are built with bamboo and tarpaulin, which is highly vulnerable to fire incidents. In 2021 fire incident, we attempted to provide full site plan for the area. In January 2022 fire incident, the planning approach was focused on local improvements to the pre-fire situation, addressing the priority access, slope stabilization, drainage, wash facilities, incorporating feedback from community and stakeholders. A on-site participatory planning approach was taken, which enabled better coordination with partners and others. During this replanning, no site plans were provided for the community consultation. Since the plan was developed on site, we incorporating the feedback from the community.
Present more than 9 million people are living in Cox's Bazar in different camps, so it is totally unplanned. A lot of deforestation and hill cutting has happened. We construct pathway, slope stabilization work, drainage work to reduce the risk of flood, risk of landslide risk, and risk of water logging. And we constructed stabilization work. We construct close relationship with site planning team to develop the better access so that fire break can develop. Our site planning team is working close coordination with site development and shelter team.
In all the post-fire replanning, there have been limitations due to the high density and hilly context, ensuring that the replanning was done timely. If a comprehensive replanning is attempted, the process takes a long time, while the implementation on the ground for the shelter reconstruction is quite fast. On-site planning together with shelter wash, site development and site management field teams help reducing gaps in communication, better understanding of priorities, receiving community feedback. This is key for securing space for key infrastructure early on. Different mechanism and level of consultation with communities need to be combined. Group session lead to agreement between several families, but door-to-door were more effective to confirm the position of some households. identify where replanning is possible and where improvement like for like is the only option, and focus resources accordingly. Facility rationalization and decongestion in some contexts require lengthy procedures which are ambitious in a quick response. The experience helped the team to prepare for the recent fire incident in Camp 11, which took place March 2023 and destroyed almost 3,000 shelters. In the replanning for Camp 11, the key access and open spaces are pre-identified and help to guide replanning and reconstruction. Through the community-led replanning, 2 new vehicular road are built and all pathways made wider in an extremely densely populated area. Health facility was created.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Muhammad Tarek. I came agarot. Side development of Mother has got a voluntary recipient. So I came agarot Maze. Ondorar for it. Zeniki Rasta Gat Ashil. Gorashil Gorgin. Line wise Noshil. Rasta Gat Rasta Gorilla Zagan Washil. So Rasta Gorilla I am side development diary. Zeniki Rasta Gatin Goridibala. Gorginore line was Goridia Zeniki Handatanda Gojil Age Ondora Age, Handatanda in Furigil Goi, therefore there, Handatanda in Tigoridia Begun, Garigura Golibala Hospital, mother then a hospital, they had a Hungary Bororo, Rastakakol Goridia as Jessa would do. In our Gor Ashil Furarage, a line a can Gor a Canada cannot Bazeva, the Ashilian Lover Rastakat Gorin over the Ondora for Zaire. Gorgin plan was Sundur Ekan Zianaga and Sirasira Gori Rastakat Gori Varibala Gori Zagakol Bairgoje are Denten Keller Gori Denteno Gori Haje air for the Ere Zeniki Boroboro Handako Rixashil Ara Rixi no mother Zeniki Gorokol relocate Gori and Kanzaka mother float Gori Shundogori Gori in Red and is Eredi are Gor Zin Abandashil in Shundogori Madidio of this SJ plan there.
West Sulawesi Disaster Response Project is a housing repair and retrofitting project that focuses on medium and light damaged houses after the earthquake in 2021. The project developed participatory assessment tools to gather related information such as building typology, damage spots, site safety, type of technicians needed, using local resources and existing skill, while introducing retrofitting with fair cement techniques through and encourage women participation in the construction implementation and project monitoring. A program was launched in collaboration with other shelter subcluster members, involving the participants throughout all the stages of the project, which was a model to respond to future disasters, especially in the early recovery stage. To see the impact, one of the beneficiaries from the program shared his stories.
Tahun 2008 saya kena musibah dan dari situ 2008 saya disabilitas. Kita semua mengungsi ke lapangan. Tenda pengungsian itu tidak akses bagi disabilitas. Saya hanya bermalam 1 malam dan saya tidak terlalu nyaman tinggal di pengungsian karena aksesnya tidak ada, WC-nya dan sebagainya. Banyak saya fokuskan waktu itu kembali ke rumah. Itu sudah dikasih pengaman semua. Rumah saya itu aksesnya ke WC. Dulunya memang kurang akses dan tempat toiletnya itu kurang bagus pada waktu itu. Klosenya itu klose jongkok, jadi tidak turun di kursi. Jadi membuatnya harus di kursi, sekarang sudah lumayan bagus lah untuk akses bagi saya. Kan kalau saya duduk, jadi kita bisa langsung pindah aja untuk buang air. Saya sudah nyaman tinggal di rumah saya.
The project has managed to retrofit 67 houses, construct 7 household toilets, renovate 2 community facilities, distribute community shelter repair kits to 222 households, conduct community-based disaster risk management training to 46 people, train 61 people on basic construction, and train 134 people on home improvements. Through this project, we aim to put people at the center of the response as the main actors whose participation is required from the design phase to the conclusion of the project. The project also enhanced female representation during post-disaster recovery process. Furthermore, construction monitoring was carried out by village committees and assisted by laborers and affected households. Thus, homeowners and laborers' capacity was enhanced regarding safer home construction or repair. Retrofitting, in particular with versioning method, was initially considered strange by the residents. However, the project managed to enhance the residents' community shelter knowledge, increase the durability of homes, and reduce construction costs. Non-engineered homes remain widespread across Indonesia. Hopefully, the project could be upscaled to enhance communities' resilience and involve broader shelter practitioners. Technical guidelines and guidelines for villages to reach funding sources to construct more durable homes should also be promoted.
This project really centered around building a resilient housing loan on a small-scale pilot in the Philippines, which was able to provide retrofitting loans for reconstruction and rebuilding efforts after houses were damaged in typhoons Goni and Roli in 2020, and then Rai/Odette in 2021. The focus of the project was on an innovative financial model that was developed to really test if seed funding, acting as diaspora remittances from US-based Filipino diaspora, could serve as an initial guarantee for obtaining microfinance loans in the Philippines. The project is really relevant for a number of reasons, primarily because the Philippines is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. And with the increasing impacts of climate change that furthers the Philippines' vulnerability to natural hazards, it's important to look at innovative solutions to invest in preparedness measures, but also look at new and novel ways of doing things with non-traditional actors like diaspora communities. So just some context on the crises directly related to this project. First with Typhoon Goni/Roli, which made landfall in November 2020. The Philippines was still recovering from previous natural disasters that caused significant loss of life and damage to infrastructure. And these losses were compounded by the effects of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which led to secondary impacts like lack of wash facilities and food insecurity. To address these needs, a resilient housing loan diaspora guarantee model was developed with a microfinance institution in the Philippines to provide retrofitting loans in reconstruction and repair. The project's target communities in the Philippines were in Cavite and Bohol, both severely impacted by typhoons. In total, 45 shelters were strengthened and monitored through the issuing of the resilient housing loan, which included roof and wall repair, floor renovation, ceiling strengthening, and more. It's worth noting here as well that all 45 homes that were strengthened were women-led households. These women retrofitted and rebuilt their homes, promoting restored livelihood means, and many participants also utilized their homes for work. This project really provides a clear example of the importance and the impact of diaspora contributions towards disaster risk recovery and community resilience, as well as their adaptive and unique roles and partnerships as non-traditional actors towards the identification of alternative shelter financing and increased capacities for affected communities. The project also empowered actors at multiple levels, demonstrating how diaspora inherently support localization by providing assistance to local actors, and in providing the loans, the participants were able to overcome not only financial obstacles, but also technical obstacles, as the technical Build Back Safer guidance and monitoring of engineers and other experts allowed them to ensure that their investment was an efficient and sustainable use of their funds and their time. I think one of the hopes that I have through this project is that its approach can inspire more diaspora engagement programming, both in acknowledgement of really the key actors that diaspora are in humanitarian assistance and in the shelter sector, but also how we can envision new ways of furthering our programming and new ways of increasing access to safe shelters for affected communities.
Hello, my name is Jacobo Muelas. Together with members of the team involved in the implementation of this program, we want to make a presentation on the case study of the regional response in temporary individual shelter to the situation in Ukraine for the 9th edition shelter projects. These public-private partnership projects allow, through existing tools and capacities in the rental market and private sectors, to provide individual transitional accommodation to thousands of people in a quick, efficient, safe, and dignified manner. The objective of this presentation will be to analyze the projects from the identification of need and context to the design, implementation, and results.
With almost 9 million people having crossed the borders in 2022 as a result of the war in Ukraine, the situation in neighboring countries to provide accommodation has resulted challenge, while most governments responded offering collective accommodation and subsidizing host families. After the first month of assistance, the objective was to support the integration towards self-sufficiency and social inclusion. Beyond the economic capacity, accessing to individual accommodation in the rental market was not always easy due to multiple barriers, such language, documentation, legal framework, or direct discrimination. The higher the barriers to access, the greater the protection risks, including exploitation, abuses, or non-compliance with minimum housing standards. The project commenced in June 2022 in Hungary, Poland, Moldova, Romania, and Slovakia, and expanded to the Czech Republic and Lithuania by September. Beneficiaries could stay for up to 29 nights for free, with a 10% exception of up to 89 nights for vulnerable individuals.
Our organization initiated the project to provide temporary relief for individuals escaping the war in Ukraine. The objective was to offer safe and dignified short-term accommodation, reducing the dependence on collective accommodation. The project, based on a public-private partnership between two organizations, leverages an e-commerce platform for short-term accommodations offered by private hosts around the world. Our organization's tasks included identifying housing needs, addressing protection issues, and aiding the affected population. The partner managed the e-commerce platform, handling landlord relations. The platform used has a pre-screened apartment pool to ensure suitable accommodation for tenants based on their needs, an instant booking and payment system to ensure quick access and eliminate direct transactions between landlords and tenants. The platform's complaint resolution system was vital for handling complaints between tenants and landlords. Our organization provided tenants with detailed information about the rented space, emergency contacts, and a system to report exploitation or abuse. We also followed up and provided other support such as cash, employment assistance, or language courses to support the integration process.
The project faced challenges from its design phase due to lack of baseline information on people's movement and varying accommodation prices across regions. Factors like subsidy removals and seasonal price hikes added complexities. Occasionally, there were issues with landlords concerning inadequate accommodations and privacy breaches. However, the organization's adaptability enabled quick solutions for affected households. Nevertheless, the project had a broad, positive impact. It provided immediate shelter, ensuring physical, mental, and emotional well-being. It catered especially to vulnerable groups facing socio-cultural discrimination. By offering an address upon arrival, it facilitated essential urban services for refugees, such as banking and job applications. The initiative provided financial assistance to both tenants, relieving their housing stress, and landlords, stimulating the local economy. Post-activity surveys indicated high levels of satisfaction among beneficiaries, an improvement in their mental and physical health. After the project, 20% could partially or fully self-fund their housing. 29% sought collective centers. The rest of the people continued to seek more affordable or assisted housing after a season of rest and recuperation in decent, safe, and healthy housing conditions.
The project stood out for requiring minimal personal data, having a public review system for vetting accommodations, ensuring minimal habitability standards, and demonstrating high flexibility to cater to specific vulnerable groups. It benefited local economies, had a real-time monitoring capabilities, and had a robust complaint mechanism. On the contrary, there were occasional mismatches between the conditions and services of a listed accommodations and their reality. The short-term stay limit of a project was sometimes inadequate. The need to assess the cases remotely, although useful, required additional resources, and staff often exceeded the anticipated workload. And market price dynamics affected the long-term sustainability of the assistance.
As we have seen, the project showcased the potential of market-based rental solutions when equipped with the right tools, and underscore the need for diverse communication materials and stronger links with non-profit and private sectors. Lessons about leveraging private platforms can be applied to contexts where such resources are absent. To enhance public-private collaboration, prerequisites such as coordination with protection specialists, establishment of collaboration and referral pathways to complementary services, further integration, and a strong exit strategy focused on long-term housing should be put in place before committing to a future individual transitional housing project. Thank you.
It is very rare to find an outdoor space in the desert where women and kids can go and spend their days at. So these parks that are rehabilitated by the community are like oases in the desert.
كنت كتير أخجل وكتير أخجل أطلع برا البيت أو أقعد بين ناس أو خالط ناس وأحكي معهم، بس الصراحة والله العظيم لأنه لقيت حالي بحاجة إني بالفعل يعني أولادي كتير تعبت نفسيتهم، فبدوا مين يصرف عليهم وما في حدا يصرف عليهم. الصراحة كان الفسيفساء كتير فايدنا يعني والله، والصراحة غير من نفسيتنا وتعلمنا يعني صار الفسيفساء رغبي إلنا يعني تعلمنا كتير شغلات حلوة، والصراحة اللي كانوا معنا كلياتهم كأخواتنا صاروا.
Greening the urban areas is the main topic of project Greening Infrastructure. We have been working in two main cities, Riyadh and Jania. Greening was the answer to urban poverty.
احنا طبعا هون بمنطقة رحاب محافظة المفرق. احنا هون طبعا عم نتعلم اشياء كثيرة ومن ضمنها اللي هي الرسم على الجدران. أول شيء طبعاً هاي الحديقة ما كانت هيك، كانت شبه خالية، مكان خالي تماماً، والآن شوف كيف صار يعني اختلفت كلياً.
التدريب اللي صار هون بالحديقة وعن طريق المنظمة إنه هاي راح تفيدني بكرة في المستقبل لقدام شوي. أنا في المستقبل راح أصير أستلم شغل لحالي ونتيجته إلي لحالي.
في أكيد إنه المردود المادي يعني هو هدف من الأهداف أكيد وجودنا هون، غير الخبرات إنه أكيد السعي وراء الرزق مثلا لازم يكون بدنا المال مشان نعيش يعني.
This is just the beginning. Starting with this project, the concept of needed urban and green spaces at the same time was absolutely necessary for recreational purposes was introduced, and for sure the benefits will be there in a few years' time.
Hello, we are delighted to be part of the 9th edition of Shelter Projects coordinated by the Global Shelter Cluster. My name is Samar Farhad and I'm the Urban Recovery and Advocacy Advisor based in Lebanon, and I'm joined today by my colleagues from our organization to provide a brief overview of our case study on our response to the Beirut port blast. We will forever remember August 4, 2020, when 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stored in the port of Beirut exploded, ripping through the capital and leaving more than 200 people dead and around 70,000 homes damaged, destroyed, or needing demolition across Beirut and its suburbs. This tragedy came at a critical time when Lebanon was facing multiple crises, including a globally unprecedented economic and financial crisis, unemployment, COVID-19, all whilst hosting the large number of refugees in the world. The blast caused severe damage to the built environment, including heritage buildings, residents, schools, hospitals, businesses, and infrastructure. UN agencies and the Lebanese army led the response with partners under the Lebanese Crisis Response Plan. Our organization was assigned to areas in Burj Hamoud, 3 kilometers within the blast. We carried out early recovery activities, providing light and medium repairs to damaged homes and repairs to small stores and businesses affected by the blast, allowing them to resume operation and to regain access to their livelihood. The project also included an urban recovery component that significantly contributed towards improved access to services, enhancing safety and security, and promoting social cohesion, such as lighting of streets and rehabilitation of an open public space and else. I will now hand over to my colleague Rami Borislan, the country focal point, to highlight the project's main outputs.
Many thanks, Samar. Due to the complexity of the situation in Lebanon at the time of the project implementation, it was important to ensure stakeholders were on board and communication was effective and frequent. Therefore, the area municipality was looped in and involved as a key partner. The financial crisis, fuel shortage, and devalued currency were all factors that were going to influence prices of materials. To overcome these challenges, we've adopted a contractor-led approach where contractors were obliged to comply with prices provided in initial quotations. Now, our approach to repairs was intentional. We looked at repairs and improvements that would contribute more to dignified living conditions, where safety, security, and well-being were prioritized. The repair works included repairing or installing of broken windows and doors, installing safe electrical connections, upgrading kitchen and bathroom facilities, and addressing any dampness or mold on ceiling and walls through weatherproofing. Now, beyond the housing unit, we also looked at common areas and installed lighting and handrails on stairs and balconies. Finally, we reached 710 individuals through 206 household unit repairs. Also, many small businesses were impacted by the blast, and repair works that included fixing broken doors and windows or fixing of security shutters on shop fronts could contribute to small businesses getting back on their feet and restarting. So we supported 24 businesses prepare for the reopening. Finally, in our effort to support the wider community, our team worked with partners, stakeholders, and community members to identify an urban recovery project. This project saw the revamping of neglected public space, and it was turned around into a safe and green area for public use. Overhead dangerous electric cables were organized through a cable management system, streetlights were introduced, and facades of 11 surrounding buildings were upgraded. I now turn to my colleague Omar Aridi, our Community Mobilization Officer and Market Systems Lead, to share with you the project highlights and lessons learned. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rami. So the main highlights of our projects in Bush Hamoud and Nabha area are the swift response to the Beirut blast, our focused efforts on repairing damaged houses, and our commitment to providing decent shelter for people in need. Our project is relevant to the audience on different levels. Firstly, by addressing the crucial humanitarian need by providing shelter for people who lost their houses in the devastating blast. Secondly, continuing our projects beyond the initial crisis phase reflects a long-term commitment to the well-being of the community. And lastly, the emphasis on meeting the minimum housing standards underscore the importance of dignity and quality of life. A set of main lessons were learned throughout the project. Firstly and mainly, during the design and planning phase, through exploring ahead the challenges and risks and working to mitigating them. Secondly, the importance of communication and ensuring unified vision in order to ensure timely and quality of implementation. And the importance of applying holistic approach in supporting communities affected by the crisis. And thirdly, and one of the most important things, is the importance of community engagement and participation in the decision-making of the projects. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Louisa from Shelterbox, and I want to tell you about a pilot project we delivered in Idlib in northwest Syria. When we delivered our project in November 21, the Syrian crisis had already passed the 10-year mark. There were almost 7 million people internally displaced, and almost 6 million of these had shelter needs. Northwest Syria experiences harsh winter conditions, which are particularly worrying for displaced families in makeshift tents, because it is they who are most vulnerable to floodwaters. So we facilitated a winterization project to assist these most vulnerable families. Working in partnership with Relief Aid, as well as distributing NFI kits and clothing kits, we also constructed 120 concrete tent bases to raise shelters above potential floodwaters, so that when inevitable floodwaters did hit, it didn't result in complete loss of shelter for these families impacted. We learned a lot of lessons from our project. Some of them included having a flexible approach to construction, meaning that we could tailor tent bases to fit the size of existing shelters, which vary vastly across camps. And this flexible approach was only possible because we had an adequate contingency budget. We also discovered that some families with mobility issues required a ramp to access their raised tent, so we constructed this for them. Unfortunately, a less positive lesson we learned was that in cases where families had an existing poor quality shelter, while the base protected them from floodwaters, they weren't also protected from the harsh winter conditions because of their existing poor shelter. So in future, we would definitely recommend adding a complementary tarp or durable shelter when constructing a tent base. Our evaluation also found that many families either added or planned to add an additional skim layer of concrete on top of their tent base for added comfort. So in future, we would definitely add this ourselves so that participants don't have to spend their own money. But overall, the project was really successful. Some of the main highlights were that having a competitive procurement process meant an in-country contractor delivered the tent bases within the time frame and crucially ahead of rain and floodwaters. So at the 6-month mark, 96% of those asked said that the tent base had fulfilled the purpose of preventing flood damage. Each tent base also only cost $70 and was constructed in 1 day. So overall, really good value for money. And finally, our evaluation found that 96% said the tent base had a positive impact on their well-being. 98% said they felt safer during the winter months. And 100% of those asked said the tent base had helped protect their family's health. I hope you find this summary of our pilot useful. Thank you for listening.
This edition of Shelter Projects contains a new section of research articles. The articles in this section are based on new primary research conducted by our Global Shelter Cluster research teams. These teams represent partnerships between humanitarian agencies and universities, generating the evidence shelter practitioners need to respond. In this way, we are building the evidence base to support shelter and settlements in humanitarian crises. Here is an introduction to each of the 3 articles.
This article is titled The Influence on the Decisions to Use Cash Assistance to Support Shelter and Settlements. And it's about how shelter and settlements practitioners make the decisions to include cash assistance or not as part of their shelter programming. The methodology that we used involved firstly a literature review to look at what the guidance actually exists and what are the major gaps. And then a series of long interviews with a wide range of shelter practitioners, shelter program managers, cluster coordinators, donor representatives, global shelter advisors, and large number of those who are in the field today or have recent field experience to get their own understanding of what the constraints were, what the challenges were, and what some of the influences were on their decision making and how they gathered the information and how they talked to others in order to inform that decision. The decision very much was about when to use cash and when not to use cash.
There are certain reasons why cash is utilized. Cash can strengthen and support self-recovery. Cash can also support local markets and livelihoods, improving prospects for economic recovery. Cash can provide flexibility and choice for participants, and cash can also be easier to scale. But there are instances where decision makers may choose not to use cash, and that can occur when cash requires political and community acceptance. Cash also requires accessible and functional markets, and cash also requires a safe and accessible mechanism to deliver cash to participants.
This article is about how constructive ambiguity can help support recovery from humanitarian crises. For communities affected by crises, their experience of recovery is a continuous journey and an ongoing process. But for the diverse actors supporting them, recovery from humanitarian crises can be understood in many ways. This article explores how this negotiation takes place between humanitarian shelter practitioners and other key stakeholders, such as donors and governments. Constructive ambiguity describes the way practitioners are finding a middle ground that key stakeholders can support, while taking into account wider limitations which cannot necessarily be immediately addressed. An initial review of academic and grey literature was conducted, followed by semi-structured interviews. The main inclusion criteria for participants were those with field experience involving their transition from providing relief to supporting household recovery, and from a range of geographic and crisis contexts.
This article is about the Venezuelan refugee crisis and implications for housing, land, property rights, and tenure security in Peru. This research was carried out to understand how rental assistance can improve access to adequate housing and tenure security for migrants and refugees from Venezuela and Peru. Access to adequate housing and tenure security is important for accessing other essential services such as education, health, economic opportunities, and other services that are essential for livelihoods. The methodology included semi-structured qualitative interviews with migrants and refugees from Venezuela, shelter administrators in Peru, implementing partners, and desk research. Some of the main findings of the significant barriers to access to adequate housing and tenure security included discrimination, financial barriers, eviction and harassment, undocumented rental agreements, and lack of access to childcare. And some of the findings of needs to strengthen access to adequate housing and tenure security included HLP assessments and overall rental market assessments for rental assistance projects, community sensitization, awareness building over documenting rental agreements and roles and responsibilities of renters and landlords, increasing access to childcare, and humanitarian coordination for referrals to other livelihood support.
Evidence makes humanitarian action more effective.
Evidence makes humanitarian action more ethical.
Evidence makes humanitarian action more accountable.
Evidence makes humanitarian action have more impact.
Evidence makes humanitarian action more effective, ethical, accountable, and have more impact.